Lillian Lily Spencer had spent her entire life in a small provincial town in Ohio. Her days were scheduled to the minute. In the morning she made breakfast for her mother, then rushed to the small cafe on Main Street, where she worked as a waitress. After her shift, she would return home, prepare dinner, give her mother her medication, and only then allow herself a few moments to touch the keys of the old, out-of-tune piano that stood in the corner of their tiny apartment. Once upon a time as a child, Lily had dreamed of attending a conservatory. Her father, who worked as a musical instrument tuner, was the first person to show her the magic of sound. He always told her that she had sensitive fingers, and that she could convey emotions through music like no one else. But after his death, when Lily was only 12, their lives changed drastically. Her mother fell ill, and Lily had to forget about her dreams, taking on the responsibility of caring for the family. Now her reality was coffee, pastries, and the weary gazes of customers, not concert halls and applause. That evening, as always, she was the last to close the cafe. The owner, Mr. Harris, had long allowed her to stay after her shift, knowing that this was her only joy in life. When the cafe door closed and the street was enveloped in nighttime silence, Lily slowly approached the piano in the corner. She ran her fingers over the worn keys, closed her eyes, and began to play. The music flowed freely, enveloping the empty cafe. She wasn't playing complex compositions, just allowing her emotions to guide her hands. Each note carried something personal: her loneliness, her fears, her unfulfilled dreams. And although the instrument was far from perfect, it still responded to her touch like a devoted friend. But this time something was different. She suddenly felt someone's presence. Her heart clenched in apprehension. Abruptly stopping the melody, Lily turned around. By the cafe door, leaning against the wall, stood a man. Tall, wearing an elegant black coat, his attentive brown eyes fixed on her. His face was familiar, but at first Lily couldn't place where she knew him from. For a few seconds, they simply stared at each other before the man smiled and slowly stepped forward. "Please don't stop," he said, his voice deep and soft. "That was amazing." Lily felt her cheeks flush. She quickly stood up from the stool and adjusted her apron. "I'm sorry, the cafe is closed," she muttered, trying to hide her nervousness. "You'll have to come back tomorrow." The man chuckled softly and stepped closer. "I'm not here for coffee," he said. "I heard you playing as I was passing by and couldn't walk away. You play differently. Every note tells a story." Now that he was closer, Lily finally recognized him. Andrew Grayson, a world-renowned pianist who had performed in some of the biggest concert halls across the globe. She had seen his photos in music magazines, listened to his performances in recordings. And now, here he was in their small town, listening to her play and saying that something about it had moved him. It was impossible. "I'm sorry, but I'm just a waitress," she stammered, not knowing what else to say. Andrew narrowed his eyes as if studying her. "I don't think someone who is just a waitress could play like that," he replied. "Did you study music?" Lily swallowed, suddenly feeling a lump in her throat. "Once," she whispered. "But that was a long time ago." Andrew nodded and, stepping back, reached into his pocket for a business card. "I'll be in your town for a few more days," he said, handing her the card. "If you'd like to talk or play again, find me." Lily hesitantly took the card and looked at it. A name, a phone number, a hotel address. She didn't know what to do. "This is strange," she murmured. "Why does this interest you?" Andrew smiled. "Because music is the language of the soul. And tonight, I heard one of the most sincere melodies of my life." With that, he turned and headed toward the exit. Lily stood there, gripping the card tightly, feeling something new ignite inside her. Fear? Excitement? Hope? She didn't know. But one thing was certain. Her life would never be the same again. Lily woke up earlier than usual. She had tossed and turned all night, her thoughts returning to the strange encounter at the cafe. Andrew Grayson, the great pianist. How had he ended up in their small town? And why had her playing caught his interest? There was no room for such coincidences in her life. All morning she felt distracted. When her mother asked if everything was all right, Lily just shook her head. Just didn't sleep well, she replied quietly, not wanting to go into details. She couldn't explain to her mother that something had happened. Something that might change everything. Or just as suddenly disappear without a trace. When she arrived at the cafe, it was already crowded. Morning customers filled the tables, some hurriedly finishing their coffee while chatting with colleagues, others reading newspapers. A usual day. But Lily felt different. She subtly touched the pocket of her apron, where Grayson's business card still rested. Her fingers felt the thick paper, but she didn't dare look at it again. Lily! Snap out of it! Marie's voice, her friend and coworker, snapped her out of her thoughts. That's the third time you've forgotten sugar in coffee orders that asked for 3 spoonfuls. What's wrong with you? Lily flinched and quickly corrected her mistake. Sorry, I got distracted, she murmured. Marie squinted, studying her curiously. You're acting weird. Don't tell me you've fallen in love? She teased with a mischievous grin. No. Lily blushed. Of course not. It's just... She hesitated. Something unexpected happened yesterday. I'm listening. Marie leaned on the counter, folding her arms. You know I love unexpected stories. Lily sighed and leaned in closer. I met Andrew Grayson. Marie's eyes widened. You're joking. No. He came into the cafe last night. He heard me playing and said he liked it. Marie froze, then let out a quiet squeal. It's fate, she whispered. Don't you see? He didn't notice you by accident. Lily shook her head. I don't know. He gave me his business card. Said he'd be in town for a few more days. But what am I supposed to do with it? She clenched her fingers, feeling anxiety rise within her. Marie grabbed her hands. Call him. He can help you. You've always dreamed of studying music. Lily looked away. It's impossible. I have responsibilities. Work. My mom. But you also have talent, Marie said firmly. And a chance. Lily, at least talk to him. Lily remained silent. Grayson had seemed kind, but could he really change anything? Or was this just a polite gesture? Would his interest fade as quickly as it had appeared? After her shift, Lily stepped outside and took a deep breath. The sun was already setting. She stood on the sidewalk, holding the business card. Her eyes traced the letters. Andrew Grayson. Phone number. Hotel. Before she could change her mind, her fingers dialed the number. Ringing. 1, 2, 3. Grayson, came the familiar voice. Lily swallowed. It's Lily from the cafe. A short pause. Lily, I'm glad you called. His voice was warm. I was beginning to think you wouldn't take me up on my offer. She took a deep breath. I don't know why I'm calling. Just, you said I had talent. But I'm not sure I believe that. Then prove me wrong, he said with a smile in his voice. Come to the hotel tomorrow at noon. I have a grand piano. I want to hear you play again. Lily tightened her grip on the phone. Okay, she said, surprised by her own boldness. See you tomorrow, Lily. The call ended. She slowly lowered her hand, feeling a strange sensation spread through her chest. Was it fear? No. More like anticipation. Tomorrow could be the day that changed everything. Lily barely slept all night. Her thoughts bounced between fear and hope. Tomorrow she was supposed to play for Andrew Grayson, the legendary musician who, for some reason, believed in her. But what if he was wrong? What if she disappointed him? Several times she nearly canceled the meeting. But every time her fingers hovered over the phone keys, something inside stopped her. The next morning, she woke up with a weight in her chest. After making breakfast for her mother, she checked the medications and made sure she didn't need anything. You're nervous today, her mother observed, watching her closely. Just tired, Lily forced a smile. She couldn't tell her the truth. Her mother would be happy, but she would also remind her of reality. That dreams didn't put food on the table or pay medical bills. When the clock struck 11, Lily threw on a light coat and, taking a deep breath, stepped out of the house. The hotel where Grayson was staying was the most expensive in town. A tall building with massive glass windows. Lily felt out of place as she walked inside. The receptionist greeted her with a polite smile and guided her to the right room. Grayson himself opened the door. He looked just as impeccable as he had that evening at the cafe, calm, confident, with a slight smile. "You came," he said, stepping aside to let her in. The room was spacious, but the centerpiece was the enormous black grand piano. Lily held her breath. She had never played an instrument so exquisite. "Make yourself at home," Andrew said casually as he sat down in a chair. "Play what you feel." Lily slowly approached the piano, running her fingers over the smooth keys. Her heart pounded. She closed her eyes and began to play. When the last notes faded into the air, Lily looked up. Grayson was watching her, arms crossed. "You play as if telling a story," he finally said. "But you're too afraid." Lily lowered her gaze. "I'm not sure I have the right to dream about this." Grayson stood and stepped closer. "Music is not a privilege. It is the voice of the soul. You have that voice, Lily. You're just not letting it speak at full volume." She looked at him, unsure of what to say. "I can help you prepare for the conservatory," he continued. "You have a chance." Lily clenched her fists. "It's impossible. I have my mother. I can't leave her." Grayson held her gaze for a long moment. "Don't you think your mother would want you to live your dream?" Lily felt something tighten inside her. Of course her mother would want that, but she couldn't afford such a luxury. She stood up. "Thank you, but I can't." Andrew nodded, but something in his eyes told her he wasn't giving up. As Lily left the hotel, it felt like her heart was being torn apart. She had made the right choice. Hadn't she? Back home, exhaustion weighed on her. She lay down on the couch, but sleep wouldn't come. In her head, Grayson's words echoed. "You're just not letting your voice be heard." That evening, she went back to the cafe. After her shift, when everyone had left, she sat at the piano. She pressed the first keys, but something felt off. The music that had always been her solace now reminded her of the choice she had refused to make. She closed her eyes and imagined herself at the conservatory, on stage, under the spotlight. Her heart raced. What if? But reality pulled her back. Her mother needed her. Lily sighed, lifted her hands from the keys and stood up. Her place was here. Or was she just convincing herself of that? Lily couldn't shake the feeling of unease. All day, her thoughts kept returning to her conversation with Andrew Grayson. He was offering her a chance, but did she have the right to take it? While she hesitated, life went on, her shift at the cafe, taking care of her mother, daily chores. Everything was the same. Yet something inside her had changed. It was as if the world had widened, showing her a path she was too afraid to follow. That evening, as she was cleaning the tables, a familiar voice broke the silence. "Do you always run away from opportunities?" She turned around. Grayson stood by the cafe door, calmly watching her. "I'm not running away," Lily protested, though she wasn't sure she believed herself. Andrew smirked. "Are you sure? Then prove it. Tomorrow morning, I've arranged a trial audition for you. You'll play in front of people who can evaluate your talent. And don't think of it as anything formal. It's just an opportunity. Nothing more." Lily froze. Her fears screamed no. But something inside her whispered try. "If you turn it down now, you'll never know if you could have achieved something greater," he added. "I'll be waiting for you at 9 a.m. at the hall on 5th Street. It's your decision." With that, Grayson turned and left, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Lily couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, replaying his words in her mind. Every part of her resisted. Her duty was here, taking care of her mother, working. But what if Grayson was right? What if she truly had potential? In the morning, she left a note for her mother, saying she had an early shift, and stepped out of the house. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her ears. She had no idea what awaited her, but her feet carried her forward. The hall on 5th Street was small but inviting. A few people were already inside. Grayson stood by the stage, speaking with two middle-aged men, one of whom was clearly a professor. When he saw Lily, a small smile appeared on his lips. "You came." She nodded, trying to hide her nerves. Good. This is Mr. Wells, a professor at the conservatory, and Mr. Carter, a pianist and member of the examination board. Grayson introduced them. We've heard you have talent, Mr. Wells said with a friendly smile. Will you show us? Lily swallowed, her eyes locking onto the grand piano at the center of the room. Her throat was dry, her fingers trembling. Slowly, she approached the instrument and sat down on the bench. Closing her eyes, she tried to focus. The sound of music filled the hall. She didn't play what they expected. No famous piece, no rehearsed composition. She played what was inside her. At first, her fingers wavered, but then they found their confidence. The music told a story of her life, her fears, and the dreams she had buried deep within. When the final note faded, Lily looked up. Silence filled the room. She didn't know what it meant, approval or disappointment. Mr. Carter was the first to break the stillness. You play sincerely. Not technically perfect, but there's truth in your notes. That's important, Mr. Wells nodded. You have something real, something that can't be faked. But you need discipline. Technique. Experience. Grayson studied her carefully. You can get into the conservatory if you want to, but it won't be easy. Lily felt turmoil rising inside her. She had a chance, but could she leave behind the life she had always known? She looked at Grayson, as if searching for an answer in his expression. I don't know, she whispered. Mr. Carter sighed. Think about it. We won't rush you. But not everyone gets an opportunity like this. She nodded, her fingers trembling slightly. She had just taken a step into the unknown, and it terrified her. Lily walked through the city streets, barely feeling the ground beneath her feet. After the audition at the hall on 5th Street, her mind was filled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she had done something she had dreamed of her entire life, but on the other, reality had caught up with her too quickly. She couldn't just disappear into the world of music, leaving behind her mother and the life she had always known. When Lily returned home, she was met with her mother's worried gaze. Where have you been? I was so worried. Mrs. Spencer's voice was filled with concern. I'm sorry, Mom, I got held up. Lily clenched her fingers. She couldn't tell her the truth. How could she explain that she had the chance to leave, to enroll in the conservatory, but she was afraid? Her mother studied her closely. Did something happen? You look different. Lily flinched. Could her face really reveal the storm of emotions raging inside? She took a deep breath and shook her head. Everything's fine, Mom. Just tired. But in reality, nothing was fine. The next day, Lily returned to the cafe. She worked as usual, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Everything that had once felt familiar now seemed foreign. Every cup of coffee, every greeting from a customer. It all felt routine and dull. Even the music she played after her shift sounded different. Empty. Lifeless. Lily. Marie's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Are you okay? You don't seem like yourself. Lily forced a smile. Just a little distracted. Is this about that pianist? Marie squinted playfully. You actually went to see him, didn't you? Lily nodded. Yes. He offered me a chance. To help me get into the conservatory. Marie's eyes widened. What? That's amazing. Did you say yes? Lily lowered her gaze. I can't. My mom. She's sick. I can't leave her alone. Marie sighed and took Lily's hands. You've always taken care of her, Lily. But think about it. Wouldn't she want you to be happy? Lily knew her friend was right, but knowing that didn't make the choice any easier. Late that night, she sat at the piano again. Her fingers mechanically pressed the keys, but the music felt foreign. Suddenly, her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Have you made your decision? Time doesn't wait. Grayson. Lily stared at the screen, feeling her stomach twist. She typed a reply but then deleted it. She didn't know what to say. But fate didn't give her time to decide. At that moment, the landline phone rang. She picked it up. The voice on the other end sounded urgent. This is Dr. Lambert. Your mother's condition has worsened. We need to discuss her treatment immediately. Lily felt her world shatter. Everything she had been thinking about suddenly seemed unimportant. She grabbed her coat and ran out the door. At the hospital, the doctor met her with a serious expression. Her condition has deteriorated. We need additional therapy, but the treatment is expensive. Lily clenched her fists. How much? The doctor told her the amount. She went cold. She didn't have that kind of money. We will do everything we can, but without proper funding it will be difficult, the doctor said gently. Is there any way you can find the resources? Lily lowered her head. The only thing that could give her the money was her dream. The scholarship Grayson had offered could cover part of the expenses, but it meant she would have to leave. She looked through the glass at her mother's frail face, her tired eyes. How could she leave her? But if she didn't, they would both remain trapped in this cycle forever. Lily closed her eyes, took a deep breath and pulled out her phone. She dialed Grayson's number. Ringing. Lily. His voice was calm, but there was a trace of hope in it. I'll do it, she whispered. There was a pause on the other end. Then Grayson spoke softly. You won't regret this. Lily stood by the hospital room window, watching as her mother slept peacefully. Grayson's words still echoed in her mind. You won't regret this. But could she be sure? Everything inside her screamed that she was making the right choice, yet guilt weighed heavily on her heart. She ran her palm over the glass, gazing at her mother's face. The lines of wrinkles, the tired expression, everything spoke of the hardship she had endured. Lily knew she had to change something. Not just for herself, but for her mother too. If she didn't take this chance, they would remain trapped in the endless cycle of financial struggles, exhaustion, and survival. At that moment, a quiet voice sounded behind her. So you've decided to leave? Lily turned around. Standing at the entrance to the room was Daniel, her longtime friend and Grayson's assistant. He had come to the cafe many times, and between them something had slowly grown, something more than just friendly conversations. But they had never spoken about it aloud. She nodded. I have to do this. For her. For myself. Daniel looked away for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. Then he met her gaze again. His eyes darkened with emotion. I understand. And yet, it hurts to know that you're leaving. Lily took a deep breath, clenching her fingers. She never wanted to cause him pain. Especially not him. I don't know what to say, Dan. I don't want to say goodbye, but if I stay, I'll just let this chance slip away again. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling heavily. I don't want to be the one who holds you back, Lily. You know that. But it's hard to imagine you not being here. Lily lowered her gaze. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to think about something other than music, other than her mother. About herself. About him. About what they could have had if things were different. I don't want that either, she whispered. But I can't choose between you and my future. It's too painful. Daniel nodded, and something new appeared in his eyes. Acceptance. Then I'll just say one thing. I'm proud of you. And wherever you go, I'll always be here if you ever want to come back. She couldn't hold back the tears. Stepping toward him, Lily wrapped her arms around him tightly. They stood there for a few minutes, knowing this was their goodbye. In the morning, Lily packed her things. It was the first step toward a new life. Grayson had already arranged everything, and the conservatory was expecting her. Everything felt too fast, too unreal. Before leaving, she stopped by the hospital. Her mother was already awake, and Lily sat beside her, taking her hand. Mom, I have to tell you something. Her mother looked at her with concern. Did something happen, sweetheart? Lily squeezed her hand tighter. I got into the conservatory. I'm leaving. Her mother's eyes widened, but there was no disappointment in them. Only surprise. Really? She whispered. But how? Grayson helped me. And I have to do this. I want to be someone. I want us to have a chance at something better. For a moment, her mother was silent. Then she smiled through her tears. Lily, I'm so proud of you. You deserve this. Lily couldn't stop herself from crying. But what about you? I'll be fine, sweetheart. You've already done so much for me. Now it's your turn to live. Lily leaned in and hugged her, allowing herself, just for a moment, to believe that everything would truly be okay. As she sat on the train heading toward a new city, her heart was filled with contradictions. But one thing she knew for sure, there was no turning back. She had chosen her dream. Now all that was left was to take the first step into her new life. The train swayed gently as it carried Lily toward her new life. She sat by the window watching fields and small towns blur past. She should have felt excitement, but all she felt was anxiety. Had she made the right choice? Had she made a mistake? She pulled out her phone and opened the last message from Daniel. "I will always be here if you ever want to come back." His words were comforting, yet they made the pain sharper. By leaving, she wasn't just leaving her mother behind. She was leaving someone who truly mattered to her. Suddenly, the train slowed, and the voice over the intercom announced their arrival. Lily took a deep breath and tightened her grip on her bag strap. Everything she had worked for was beginning now. The conservatory greeted her with grandeur. Towering columns, majestic windows, and inside, music drifting from different rooms. Everyone here lived and breathed music, and suddenly Lily felt small, insignificant. Grayson met her at the entrance, as composed and confident as ever. "Welcome, Lily. Are you ready to begin?" he asked with a slight smile. She nodded, though fear churned inside her. Her first challenge was meeting the faculty. One of them, a strict-looking man with silver hair named Professor Brooks, made it clear that he had no patience for weakness. "Only those who are willing to give everything to music belong here. Are you sure you're ready?" he asked, his gaze piercing. Lily clenched her fists. "Yes," she answered firmly. "Then prove it. Play," he said, gesturing toward the grand piano in the center of the room. She stepped forward and sat down. Inhale, exhale. Her fingers brushed against the keys, and the room filled with sound. She didn't choose a complex piece. She played what came from within. The music spoke for her. When the final note faded, silence lingered in the room. Lily hesitated to look up. Then Professor Brooks gave a small nod. "You have potential. But that's not enough. You are too uncertain, and that is your biggest flaw. Let's see if you can overcome it." It wasn't quite approval, but it wasn't rejection either. A weight lifted from Lily's chest. She had taken the first step. The following weeks were grueling. Lessons stretched 10 hours a day. Instructors demanded perfection, and the students around her were confident and incredibly talented. Lily felt out of place. In moments of despair, she wanted to give up and return home, but every time she thought of her mother, of Daniel, and of the reason she was here. Grayson noticed her struggle. "You think too much," he told her after a failed performance. "Music isn't about fearing mistakes. It's about life. Give yourself permission to make them." Those words stayed with her. She began to approach music differently, not as a test but as a part of herself. One evening, she received a message from her mother. It was short. "Proud of you. Everything is fine here." Lily broke into tears. That was all she needed to hear. Now she had no right to give up. Several months had passed since Lily entered the conservatory. Time had flown by in a whirlwind of endless lessons, rehearsals, and performances. Her fingers no longer trembled over the keys, and her heart no longer clenched with fear before strict professors. She still felt like an outsider among the brilliant students, but with each passing day she realized she was no longer the girl from the cafe. She was becoming something more. The turning point came with her first public performance. It was an exam concert in front of a jury and fellow students. Lily was chosen at the last minute to replace a sick participant, leaving her no time to prepare. All she had was her emotions, her story, her music. As she stepped onto the stage, her heart pounded. The hall was full. In the front row sat Grayson, giving her a subtle nod of encouragement. She took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. The first note, the second, and then her fingers began to tell a story. A story of a girl who had dreamed of music but had been tested by life. A story of how fear had held her back. Yet she had found the strength to move forward. The music flowed effortlessly, as if it was deciding its own course. When the last note dissolved into the air, the hall fell silent. And then applause. Real sincere, thunderous. Grayson smiled. "Do you believe in yourself now?" he asked after the performance. Lily nodded. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. But life didn't allow her to relax. Her mother still needed treatment, and every week at the conservatory reminded her that she had to succeed, not just for herself but for her mother as well. Lily took on extra work, playing the piano at a small concert hall and giving lessons to children. She pushed herself as hard as she could. One evening after a long day, she received a message from Daniel. "I'm in town. Want to meet?" Lily stared at the screen for a long moment. Her heart pounded faster. She hadn't seen him since she left. She agreed. They met at a cozy cafe. Daniel looked just as she remembered, but there was something new in his eyes, a mixture of quiet sadness and genuine happiness to see her. "You've changed," he said with a smile. "For the better," she teased. "For the best," he replied seriously. They talked for hours, reminiscing about the past and sharing their lives now. Daniel told her he had returned to work in the city and was no longer traveling with Grayson. Lily realized she had missed him more than she had expected. "Are you happy?" he suddenly asked. Lily thought for a moment. She had worked hard, struggled, endured, but was she happy? Yes. She was pursuing her dream, and though the road had been difficult, she knew now she was exactly where she needed to be. "Yes," she said. "I am happy." Daniel smiled. "Then I'm glad." They stepped outside and stood for a moment. Lily didn't want to say goodbye, and in that moment she realized part of her heart still belonged to him. "Daniel," she started, but he gently took her hand. "You have so much ahead of you, Lily. I don't want to rush you. Just know I'm here, and I'll always be happy to be by your side." Lily squeezed his fingers, smiling softly. "Thank you, Dan." And at that moment she knew her life was finally her own. No longer a duty, no longer fears or obligations. Just her choices, her path, her music. Lily plays her first solo concert. The stage is bathed in light, the hall is full. In the front row sit her mother, Grayson, and Daniel. She takes a deep breath, closes her eyes, and presses the first key. Her music is confident, passionate, sincere. She is no longer afraid. She is finally free. Sometimes, to find yourself, you must dare to leave the past behind, even when it's terrifying. True freedom comes when you stop fearing the journey toward your dream, no matter the obstacles. Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button so you don't miss more heartwarming stories.